Okay, everyone, you've made it. This is the part 4, the last screencast in this week's lecture. It's been a long lecture, so I hope you're not too tired. I hope you took care of yourself and took lots of breaks. So we're going to get into the rest of the constructivists and talking about their impact on us in early childhood education. So Lev Vygotsky was a contemporary of Piaget's. They lived around the same time. Vygotsky died very young in his late 30s. And so Piaget used a lot of Vygotsky's work to continue his own theories. So there's a lot of influence from Vygotsky into Piaget. I think there would have been more influence the other way around on Vygotsky had he lived longer. So Lev Vygotsky brought to us this idea of the zone of proximal development, ZPD. And the idea is that this is where the child currently is on something in specific. And with help from a peer or a more capable adult, they can get to this next spot. And there are strategies that are used to build that learning that will then become the new spot where the child is, and it will continue on from there. So there are two things that are used. One is scaffolding, and that is the support or help offered by an adult or a more competent peer to move the learner through the zone of proximal development. There's also private speech, which is talking aloud to work through a problem. So I'm going to turn the image back on and I'm going to use an example. So say a child is learning to write the letter D and another adult is helping them, and they might go hand over hand with the child who's holding a marker, and they might say down and around as that child works on the letter D. The child might continue on later and practice themselves and say down, around as they do it. As the child gets more capable, that private speech becomes internal. And for a while, that child will likely be replaying that in their head. And you might even see them do something like this, where, they're using their head to kind of show that they're still going down and around in their mind. And eventually that goes away and the child just makes the letter D and they don't need that sing-songiness. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide, and I want to talk about the implications of the zone of proximal development on guidance. Because as children grow and learn, they come through different stages, as we've talked about, and they learn different things around relating to others. So this zone of proximal development has implications on what the child currently can do now and where they can come by learning from their peers or adults. So something really common in young children is that when they don't like something someone else has done, particularly another child, they might hit them with the object that they have. As children develop, sometimes we say, use your words, say, I don't like that, or I want my toy back. And you'll see children get to the next stage where they will still hit their peer over the head. And they'll say, I don't like that, or I want my toy back, while they hit them. And then eventually they'll refrain from hitting their peer and say, I don't like that. That zone of proximal development, this area of helping them get where they're going, is our job as teachers, and also to use the other children who are more capable in that child's surroundings to help them as well. So an example I have of this is that my daughter took swimming lessons for quite a while. And she just couldn't quite get to the next phase of learning to swim. She was really close, but she just couldn't quite put it together. This was when she was 4. We had her friend over, and her friend had just learned to swim a few weeks prior. And within 15 minutes of being in the pool together, my daughter learned how to put the pieces together and to swim by being with that child who had just learned how to do it. Because that more competent peer who's just mastered that task actually knows the very minimal steps that you need to take in order to get there. Whereas myself, someone who's been swimming for a long time, and my daughter's teachers who've been swimming for a long time, have sort of forgotten that sweet spot of just learning to master something, so we couldn't quite get her over that hump. So now I want to talk about Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner theorized that individuals learn in a multitude of ways, and it's not just the traditional, sorry about my typo there, this should be traditional definitions, not transitionals. But it can't be limited to traditional definitions. So people are smart in ways that are not just reading, writing, and math, and that the purpose of education is to help individuals express these unique abilities. So Howard Gardner has identified 8 theories of multiple intelligences. He did this at his work at Harvard called Project Zero. And originally he had worked with adults who had brain trauma and brain injuries as they were relearning. And he came across this idea of multiple intelligences and fleshed this out in the 80s and 90s. He is currently a professor emeritus at Harvard, so he is no longer a full-time professor, but he still does work with Project Zero. Anyway, you can see here the various intelligences. Bodily kinesthetic is also labeled as body smart. That means people who are really good at using their physical body to learn and understand the world. They tend to be sporty, but they don't necessarily have to be. Sorry about that slide change. And then we have interpersonal. That's people who really understand other people, people smart. They're very intuitive about other people, really good at motivating and understanding other people. We have word smart, verbal linguistic, and those are our readers and writers, our poets, our wordsmiths, people who are really good at Scrabble and crossword puzzles. We have logic smart, that's logical, mathematical. Those are our scientists and our mathematicians. Naturalistic, nature smart, those are our hikers and gardeners and eco warriors. We have self-smart, intrapersonal. These are people who really know themselves and understand themselves and are really good at being aware of how they are in the world. We have visual spatial people. These are our picture smart people. And we have our musical people. They're people who learn and think in music. You don't have to be a professional musician to be music smart. You don't have to be, you don't have to play for the Broncos to be body smart. You can be smart in these ways without being professionals who use these smarts. So I am obviously not a famous musician, nor am I a famous athlete, but I am body kinesthetic and musical, which means that I really learn best by engaging in the world and experiencing things for myself and touching things and doing things and figuring things out. That is one way that I learn. Another way that I learn is through music and all auditory means, actually, not just music, to the point where I learn a lot more from listening than reading. I've really learned this in my adult life. I used to think that I didn't like to read because I was lazy or something, but I really realized that I actually love the idea of reading, but I like it much better in audiobook format. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks now because just sitting down and reading is not so much my skill set. But also because I'm highly auditory, sounds can be very distracting for me. So if there's fluorescent lights in a classroom that are buzzing or someone is tapping their pen, I have a really hard time listening to the instructor because I'm heavily auditory. So just an example of how you can be intelligent in one of these ways, but you don't have to be a famous musician or athlete or writer. So I want to wrap up this segment with a quote, and it is, "Children love and want to be loved, and they very much prefer the joy of accomplishment to the triumph of hateful failure. Do not mistake a child for his symptom." And I'm going to change the view here and put myself back in the corner. And I just want to say to you that I think this quote really sums up the essence of the guidance philosophy. That children do want to be accomplished and they do want to do well in the world. We all do. All people have good intentions. And sometimes children have challenges in the classroom, and sometimes they can be there are children that are more difficult than others. Do not mistake these difficulties for the essence of the child. The essence of the child is all the same, that they want to be loved, that they want to feel the triumph and joy of success. And it's our job to separate these challenging and difficult behaviors from the intention of the child and help them be the best that they can be in the world. So thank you once again for sticking with me on this really long lecture series. Trust me, I am as tired as you are. Giving this lecture was pretty exhausting, so I can only imagine how tiring it was to absorb it all. I hope you learned a lot from this because, like I've said, this is really foundational to moving through the rest of this course. I'll see you all in discussions, and I'll be back with another lecture next week. Have a great week. As always, reach out with any questions, comments, or anything you need. Take care.